Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
So we're going to conclude our final class. If you'll excuse the expression, we're going to conclude our final class in this course with sort of a crash. You know, it's going to be like a crash course in how to keep systems secure. We're gonna blitz a variety of security interests and methods in a final attempt to wrap up as much as possible. We have had some interesting events in the middle of our class, and I do want to walk down through the expectations for the rest of our season before we take a look at some of the stuff we've posted recently. There is some material that I have not explicitly covered in the class because it's pretty easy. It's a pretty easy read. It's very basic stuff. There was an original legacy model of enterprise authentication called NT-LAN Manager, NTLM for short. And it was found to be vulnerable. It was exposed because of the older style hashes that were used for login credentials. One of the things that we want to make sure of is that you know that if you have an Active Directory domain, even if it's running NT-LAN Manager version 2 or NTLM2, you'll see a lot of this in the territory and in the region. There are many installations of Active Directory, and I want to say in a shocking percentage of organizations yet that still use the older style of authentication method. Kerberos was designed by MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and it's a trust-based, ticket-based, time-centered method of authenticating that tends to thwart a lot of replay attacks. And the encryption that's used for this particular method of authentication is far superior. I mean anything can be hacked, but basically Kerberos is a much better, a much stronger way. And if you're installing Active Directory or you're setting up new domain controllers and there are old ones in the mix, the tendency is for the domain to operate in the older modes. Put another way, if you have a system that is working, let's see, this is all an attack. Now, this is where we want to be. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, nuts. Okay, let's do this again. So one of the things that's really important to understand is this idea of functional level. And oftentimes, an older organization will have a legacy domain. Now, UVI is a good example of this. UVI started an Active Directory domain a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, like many organizations, when the Windows Server operating system was NT 4.0, and they used a LAN manager type of domain name. It didn't have a fully qualified domain name like groovy.local or uvi.edu. It was just a set of 14 characters and just a single word. And UVI's domain is CAC. I'm not sure what that stands for, but that's the domain that was around. Can everybody see my screen here? if we started a domain a long time ago, one of the exposures that occurs is that we have older legacy software and older legacy interests that require a more traditional or customary mode of configuring resources. A good example of this would be the network file system, or NFS, right? You can have redundant file systems, or you can have older file systems and an older functional level for your domain. Here you see that Windows Server 2016 is the latest level for this domain, but we have older versions like Windows Server 2008 or even Windows Server 2003. And what will happen is that those older modes of operating can create problems. Another common issue is that you have these different layers of security policies. Now, we've talked about security policies. We've talked about group policy objects, haven't we?
Yeah.
Does everybody remember group policies? So in the domain, we can have a group policy that applies to the group. So we can apply something to the domain. And I want you to notice how this works here. We have sites. So we have students on 2 sites. We can set up 2 different sites. We can use our domain and say that we have 3 sites, actually. We have systems in Summerville, South Carolina. That's where this is hosted, Summerville, South Carolina. So we could have a default first site, and then we could have a second site, St. Thomas, and a third site, St. Croix. And we could establish which subnets are active on those sites and which servers are operating on those sites. So when they synchronize their security changes, then and the policies that they implement, that they're all on the same page, right? And so one of the things that you can do to check the health of an organization and its Active Directory is just to run a simple command. And this is probably going to be like, these are additional credit questions on your final exam. It's called rep admin. You do this from an administrative command prompt. It's called replicate administrative. So at that point, we're talking about the domain controller. We're talking about the Active Directory domain database. And we want to sync all. And if we see this, it means basically that all of the changes in the domain have synced. So if I change someone's password, if I go in here and I take, is Robert with us today? Yeah, Robert's here. So let's say I change Robert's password, or I change his group membership. I make Robert a member of the domain administrators, and I say that he's only allowed to work or log in certain hours, and he's only able to log on to certain machines. Does everybody see what I'm doing here? And hello? Kind of, sort of, maybe. Did I lose everybody? I've had audio issues before. Can someone respond? I need to know.
No, I hear you. You're loud and clear.
I'm here.
Okay. I can set policies for computers, and I can basically work with a lot of changes, but the moment I make that change for Robert, if Robert logs out, see, that doesn't take effect until Robert logs out. And if Robert logs back in, and he happens to log in on Sirius, because let's say Sirius is the domain controller on his site, and I'm using Alnatak. So I'm sitting on the other domain controller. So I make the change and I don't sync. Then what happens is that those changes may not take effect all the way across. And speaking of changes, when we talk about security policies, we said that you could apply a security policy to an entire domain. But it's also true that you can apply a security policy to a local computer. Now, what do we mean? Now, here is a virtual machine running on my laptop. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So just as you have local accounts, everybody remember the work group or standalone security account management model? Does everybody remember that?
Yeah, that's what we started with.
Yeah, you had to set up all these different accounts on each machine. What a pain, right? Well, you have local accounts. In the same manner, you have local security policy, and you can open up this console by going to the start menu and typing in gp edit.msc. That stands for Management Console, right? It's a Microsoft console. And that brings up the group policy editor. Now, one of the things that you need to understand is this order of precedent. So you have local policies and local accounts on each individual system, but then you have domain accounts, right? You have domain accounts. And if I want to look here, I can go into administrative templates and then Windows components. And I can set up, and this is one thing I wanted to show you on Friday. We ran short on time. So if I go ahead and I do this, and then I scroll down, you can see that there's a Windows Update option. And if I maximize this, I can look at specify the intranet server. So I can specify that I want this thing to pull from Hermes. And why would I want to do that on a local level? Well, it's a matter of redundancy. So from Friday, we talked about redundant levels of security measures to reduce exposure, right? If we have a domain policy, but then I'm on a laptop and for some reason, or I'm in a, everybody remember Hurricane Maria and Irma?
Yes.
How many networks were actually functioning after Hurricane Maria and Irma? On 1 October, anywhere.
ANT was barely working.
Oh,
Occasionally.
barely, and that was cellular. A lot of the other networks just weren't working. So if you have a computer that's part of a domain and it doesn't connect with a domain controller within 30 days, the computer account is put in a sleep status, right? Because those computer accounts are supposed to keep fresh with the domain. That's one of the security measures. It has to do with Kerberos. After 30 days, it gets stale, and that computer record starts to dysfunction. The problem with that is that your security policies also stop working. So if you have a domain security policy, there's nothing that forces that machine to go to where? To the mothership to get its updates. And that's an important idea. That's a critically important idea, because when we look at our update server, and let's take a quick look at our, have we looked at our update server yet? Have I showed you the update server? How cool it is? Everybody remembers that some of our systems were hacked last week, right? Some of our systems got some unholy attention, right? Everybody remember that? By the way, before I forget, so I do need you, I'm going to be posting, I've posted this, and I need you to have it done pretty quickly. So I want you to push to try to have it done by midnight tomorrow. by 11:59 PM tomorrow. But we've done some of this in class already. You'll see in just a minute. You're gonna go, oh, we're just doing what we did in class. Your assessment I want done by 11:59 PM Wednesday of this week. Now I'm gonna post an item analysis, and this is a 10-point. I'm sorry, that should read 10 points. Or is it 5? You're gonna have an item analysis where you can review items that created the most challenge for students so you can reconcile, right? And I want you to be able to retake your assessment by the end of this week. Now, if you need more time for the retake, if you want to take more time into exam week to complete your second attempt of the module 3 assessment, just send me an email, okay? Let's talk about the final exam for a minute while we're on this run here. Your final exam includes all the material from the midterm. So all the material and all the modules, all the assignments, all the assessments, all of the solutions, everything. It's available according to the exam schedule on 3 PM at Friday, on Friday, 6th of May. At that point, exam conditions will be live, and you'll find that the materials and resources that are commonly available in the modules will no longer be commonly available because exam conditions will be in effect. But you don't have to take it at 3 PM on Friday. You have until, it's a 2-hour window. And if you do have other exams you got to, schedule, that's cool, I understand. But basically, you do have until 11:59 PM Saturday, 7 May 2022. Okay? Any questions?
No questions from me.
Okay, now we've made mention of the registry from time to time. We've made mention of sys internals, right? We've talked about sys internals and how you can use sys internals to get a handle on weird stuff. And so again, some of this we're going to need you to read and research on your own. There's some materials from the author that are worth a closer look. In particular, I want to talk to you about this one. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
So this is from chapter 12, and this has to do with exposures, right? So when you're looking at vulnerabilities and you're looking at a systematic approach from the textbook, it says, hey, you got to deal with physical hardware, you got to deal with operating system kernel issues, BIOS, right? So when we talk about securing your system and starting from scratch, that's why we flash the BIOS. Hello? Hello? Is there a Schneider in the house? Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, that's where the BIOS is, right? So you probably wondered, is he pulling my leg, making us go through this extra stuff? There it is right there. That's from the textbook, right? And then of course, we've had you what? Update not just the OS, but also applications, yeah? So applications and utilities. I just thought that I would take a few of these slides from chapter 12, and I want you to spend time. Look at this right here. Patch third-party applications and operating system vulnerabilities, right? The top 4 strategies for prevention are patch, 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 Windows software update services, whitelist approved applications. Now, Microsoft has built-in whitelisting. Well, sometimes when I'm typing in a hurry and there's an autocorrect, it changes this W to an S for some reason, and it gets messy. It's a poor sense of humor on my last day, but in case you see something in one of my addendums or something, and just, it was autocorrect. I want everybody to understand. Whitelisted applications, that's what you use group policies to enforce. You can basically say only these applications run on these systems, right? So they did this study in 2009. They found out that over 85% of targeted cyber intrusions could have been prevented. You lock down which applications you're allowed to run and everybody else, all the other applications, nope. It's called application whitelisting, right? And there used to be a champ in this arena called Bit9, and then some security vendors bought Bit9 and they became another product, but Microsoft realized, oh my gosh, everybody's going to have better security than we do, so they came up with whitelisting and incorporated it into their group policies. Restrict administrative privileges. So we can assign administrators not just for the domain, but for the organizational unit, create defense in depth, redundancy, right? So this is why we do group policies, site policies, and so on. And if we restrict administrative privileges, that means the default account, the default that was set up, the administrator account, that's why we change it, the name, the description, and we disable it, right? We take it out because everybody knows where it is and what it is, and we always look for it. Another way to do this is to create different network conventions. Does everybody have to use a .1 for a gateway? Hello? I'm just asking a question. Does everybody have to use a .1 for a gateway? If a hacker wants to know how to get out of your network, do you want to give them like a direct flight to escape? I mean, I'm just saying, there's all sorts of little things that we can do, right? Notice which players are involved with these strategies, right? SANS, Department of Energy, DHS, National Security Agency. Here are some, right? Ensure critical content is secured, appropriate network protection mechanisms are used. So that gets down to managed networks and using IP helper. Does the term IP helper ring a bell? What do IP?
Yeah.
Yeah, IP helper points a connected device to the DHCP server. Did we tell you about what happened with the student that hooked up a Wi-Fi router on the Albert Einstein campus 2 years ago? Did I tell you this? So in a managed network, when you have an IP helper statement on your switches, you're telling it, okay, this is where you go for your DHCP server and only go here for your DHCP server. And then that DHCP server says, oh, this is your gateway. Oh, this is your DNS server. It defines all the, oh, and don't use NetBIOS, right? Does all those things. Oh, and here's your time server. So your Kerberos is working just fine. Everybody's on the same clock, down to the same second. Well, 2 years ago, a student was frustrated with Buck's Wi-Fi. It wasn't working really well in the classroom building where they were attending classes. And this was off to the side. It was a smaller building off to the side. So the enterprising student brought their own home Wi-Fi router to the Albert Einstein campus, disconnected a printer and hooked up their Wi-Fi router. What we had was a rogue DHCP server operating on the campus network. It started issuing all kinds of addresses, which didn't play nice with other addresses. To make a long story short, it took a day and a half for them to figure out what was wrong. They had to narrow it down to a region of the campus, then to a building, then to the floor of the building, then to the room, then to the jack. And then they finally got a hold of the student. This is where network protection mechanisms are appropriate, right? This is why physical things have to happen. Here's operating system hardening, right? The firewalls. You have firewalls. If we have group policy objects and we have a hacker from Russia, we can publish a single rule domain-wide, and every system in UVI blocks the ripe Russian we saw last week with a click of a button, right? Any questions so far? removing unnecessary services, applications, protocols, configuring users and groups, even configuring something weird like the admin. So this is, some of these graphics are actually pretty good. Of all the slides out of our textbook, the first dozen or so slides, the first 12 slides in chapter 12, everybody remember this, please. The first 12 slides in chapter 12. They're in your resources folder. This is kind of echoes a lot of the same stuff we've been talking about, but it's in a very condensed, very summary friendly format. Any questions at this point? All right, I'm gonna let you check that out yourself, right? But a lot of this stuff is just a good refresher for what we've covered to this date. You need to test the system security. You need to try to hack your own security measures. Yeah, makes sense. Kind of, sort of. Any questions so far? Hello?
No.
Yeah, I read it.
So if I'm on a, just a plain server and I'm on this machine, and I was going to show you Hermes in just a second, right? Basically, this machine, I'm in my local security policy. And this local security policy is one of two options I can use to enforce. So I have the local security policy that's a specialized, a newer and improved. Oh, look. Defender firewall rules, application control policies. That's where my application whitelisting is. So I can even work some magic about which applications I'm allowed to use and not allowed to use, even on the local level, if I use local security policy. Generic group policy is broader in nature. It doesn't just cover software, it also covers Windows settings. So you're going to find a mix of features and functionality between the two. The important point to remember is that on a local level, there's more than one tool, right? So there's local group policy editor, and there's local security policy, security being a subset of the group. Does everybody understand? Okay. Let's talk about precedent. Okay. So we said that the local security policy is like a local SAM or a work group. This executes first on a system, but we also have security policies that we can settle or set up or configure for a site, for a given site inside our domain. On the domain controllers, we can say, okay, I have a site policy for St. Thomas because they have more tourists. And because St. Thomas has more tourists, we need tighter policy on St. Thomas. I can have site security policy. It executes next, and if it conflicts with the local, it overrules the local security policy. Any question about how site overrules local? Hello?
No, that makes sense.
Okay, then domain, organization-wide. Domain security policy executes next. And if it conflicts with either site or local, it overrules either site or local. So if a domain policy is stricter, then it overrules the site policy. If it's stricter than something local, it overrules the local. It'll overrule any of the previous two. Organizational unit. Now the OU, we have an OU on our domain. So if I go back into here and look at my domain controller just for a moment, I look at on the tech. here's an organizational unit for the class. I can have site policies, but basically what I want to do is set up a site, right? As opposed to an organizational unit. An organizational unit are these components inside Active Directory, and I can set up specific security policies. So I can say this class actually has less security than the system security class, right? I can set up a different organizational unit for CSC 465 and make those really stringent security requirements, right? And while I have this in here, let's finish a thought. Does everybody remember a psychedelic drug called LSD?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's still around.
yeah, it's not a good drug, is it? Yeah, so just to help you remember the order of execution or precedence, just remember local site domain, that's LSD. And if you take LSD and get it wrong, then you have to write an IOU to Charon, the gatekeeper of Hades, which is the Greek word for hell. So remember, OU comes last, right? You have to write an OU. If you take LSD, if you get LSD wrong, then you have to write out an IOU. That's how you remember the sequence or precedence, right? So local site domain organizational unit. Now this is one thing that I want to impart upon you that I think of all the things I can leave you with for our course for system security. Oh, and here I said 255, so I'm going to change that to 465. My bad. So we do have an operating systems deployment course, and these policies are very powerful. If you keep straight which policies you need, you can use PowerShell to load them on startup. Now, why is that a thing? Okay. If you understand how these policies each work and they're redundant, you have multi-layers of, you have distributed layers of defense, right? So you can have, if there's something really important to make sure it happens, you can enforce it on the local level, the site level, the domain level, but then you can create a PowerShell script that loads every time the system starts up. Now, why is that a big deal? Everybody remembers Windows Software Update Server, right? Everybody remembers Windows Software Update Server? Hello?
Yeah, just checking to see that we're up to date with all the updates.
Yes. So let's look at Hermes for a second. Let's pretend you're a hacker. You're a hacker from Russia. And you want to cause pain and suffering. And you have two elements operating in your midst. You have the Windows Software Update Service. Can everybody see this color-coded thing here? Kind of color-coded?
Yeah. It's computers with errors, right?
Yeah, basically, the Windows Software Update Server is going to show you which ones still need updates, which ones have been installed, right? Which security updates need to be approved. So you have to approve certain updates, but basically you can control which updates execute. The important thing is that you can approve and push them. And then you get a chance to see which computers are sitting ducks, which ones haven't updated yet. And oftentimes it's as simple as waking them up. Maybe they went to sleep, so they're asleep, yeah, or they haven't been connected to the network for a while. So they need to be connected. They need to reseat the cable. A lot of times there's simple things. The important point I want to impart on you is there was a mix of systems that had updates early last week, and our friend from Russia really didn't spend a lot of time on half of our systems, despite the fact that he was, or she was, very motivated. Over 900 attempts on a single machine. I would call that motivation, right? Is everybody with me? There's some thought and love and care that goes into a scenario where somebody takes a 24-hour period and tries to, now maybe they wrote a script and it was automated, but the point is they gave some quality time to try to hack one of our systems. Now, let's say that we have a Windows software update server and somebody gets to the trouble where they can actually connect now, like they did last Monday, which is shown in this video. I posted these videos in resources, in session recordings, in current season. Here we go. This is the one right here. Last Monday, a week ago, we walked through this and there was a live Russian on your screens, more than one of you. The other boxes were untouched. And that's because there was a different implementation of the software update cycle, right? In simple terms, if somebody gains access and they've spent quality time, a half a day, 4 hours, let's say, a morning or an afternoon, and then a Windows update server pushes that quick, fast, and in a hurry, 1,000 times faster. And the user doesn't have to worry about like stopping their work or rebooting because it's that quick. Then we've undone 4 hours of effort by a hacker. But let's take it a step further. Of all the things that you can do for system security, you need to automate the security measures or policies in this case. If you have PowerShell commands that reapply every time you start up, they basically reset the clock every time the system reboots. So let's recap. The Windows Software Update server pushes updates very quick and says, okay, just reboot. And so you can keep going. And it just takes a second. 4 hours of work is gone. As soon as it starts up, what does it do? Oh, it re-executes everything else. Well, let's say the hacker spends another day breaking back in again. Well, all it takes is a restart and they start all over again. It makes things difficult for hackers. It sours the milk. Has anyone ever had a mouthful of sour milk before? Has anyone ever experienced that? Hello?
Rather than the middle, with the Russian then, I'm assuming the Russian then had different ports to that in and have a record of that. Would they not then continue with additional ports, or would that somehow put them back to ground zero?
That's a great question. That's an excellent question. The answer is, if they see something important on your systems they want, they would likely continue. The fact that they're that devoted and they've spent that kind of time, they would do it. But here's the cool part. You remember this? See, I can set up security policies on the local level, the site level, the domain level, and the organizational unit level. And basically, I can create a custom firewall so that I block the entire range. I want I want you to see how this looks and works, and then I'm going to review the quick steps that you need to follow for your solution, okay? On our system, on most systems, if you go into the Windows Defender Firewall, did we walk through this on? So we have an inbound rule. We can set this up by policy. But if I create a new rule, I can block a custom range. So I'm going to block all programs. And I'm going to block any protocol. Everybody with me so far? Which remote IP addresses does this rule apply to? I can add 94.232.0.0/16. That means anyone in that region of Russia operating with that internet service provider. Bill,
Right,
when I go and click next and then say block, and then say I want it to apply to every network scenario possible, a private network, a public network, a domain network. I'll give it a name like Ripe Russian. Okay, that blocks anybody from that part of Russia on that network, and that could be a huge area of Russia, right? From doing what I need, and more importantly, I can apply those firewall rules at multiple levels. So basically, if they manage to try to hack through one level or another, they don't get anywhere. So the short answer to your question is yes, they would probably try to keep at it for a time, but our goal is to make things to sour the milk. Our goal is to sour the milk.
okay, so then if you restart, then that applies, but if you have not restarted, you're still vulnerable.
Only if the firewall rule was taken down. And if they're very skilled and they figure out how to disable some firewall rules, there's some malware that disables the firewall as soon as it executes. Then some of your remedies, when you have a runaway freight train, you can, disconnect the machine, you can power it off, you can restart it. There's a variety of things you can do. The trick is to have some automated measures that are in place, so it makes resetting your system a whole lot easier. Does that make sense?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so let's look at your solution. Let's do. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes,
Okay. So there's only a few sections that you have to worry about, but basically in section 1, we're doing what we did last week and what I showed you just now. So you're going to use the IP address shown from the live connection by a Russian operating in Eastern Europe from that video on 18 April. You're going to set up an inbound Windows Defender firewall, just like I demonstrated. Okay. You're going to capture a screenshot of this rule, green and working. By that, I mean the firewall rule that shows it'll have a green arrow next to it. Okay. As far as WinS, right? You can set the net BIOS over TCP/IP in the WinS tab and capture the screen. And then enter the net sh command. And then when you look at the WinS tab, it should show different, right? So we're going to provide you with a net sh command that you use to reset or to basically disable NetBIOS over TCP/IP. So all you're doing is you're capturing the WinS tab, showing that it's enabled. Let me show you what I mean by that. So I'm gonna go into advanced and go to the WinS tab right here. I'm gonna set it to default. So I'm gonna take a picture of this. You're probably saying, why would I do that? You wanna see how the command works. You're gonna take a picture of this, then you're gonna run the netsh command that I provide to you. And then that's gonna change this so that when you go back into here and you click on WinS, it'll look like this instead, right? So you'll have the command output that says it executed successfully. And then when you go in here, you'll see, oh yeah, there it is. That confirms that the command worked, right? So that's what I want for your section 2. Any questions about section 2? So you have a command you add this command in your startup script. That means every time the system starts up, it disables NetBIOS. So even if there are, reset attempts. DNS exploits, you're going to go into the hosts file and modify the hosts file. We demonstrated this in class, yes? I went into hosts. I think we did that last Friday. Does anyone need to see that again?
I'm sure that would help.
It's in the video. So what I'll do is add little links for precise time stamps in the file. So hosts, come on, man. Right, so in here, let's open up, oh, let's do Taurus. Is Robert still with us? Oh, I think my finger just bounced. So you start Notepad. And you run it as administrator. And then you open the hosts file, which is embedded. If I go into here, I'm in the C drive, Windows, System 32. Drivers, Etsy, and I open up all files. Here's my hosts. So I can hard code entries for the 2 domain controllers in my DNS server. That's what you're entering. We'll provide you with that information and I'll include it with the solution. Okay. So you'll enter 192.168.50.110. And that's serious.groovy.local. And then I'll just copy this line just to make it easy here. .111 is Alnitak. And 120 is Vega DNS. All you do is save it. I'm not going to save it because I don't want to rob Robert of his educational opportunity here on his own machine. But you would click save, and then basically, even if somebody hijacks your DNS, you're always going to be able to find your domain controllers. You're always going to be able to execute group policy. You're always going to be able to find the named resources instead of being redirect to fake resources. It's huge. Any questions? We did this in class on Friday. We want you to retire your administrator account and rename it. And then we want you to set up in group policy Hermes, like we just showed you. We open up group policy on the local level and then on the domain level. And then we want to set up a startup script to execute domain and local each time the system loads. You can do something for additional credit. Do any of you have access to your Wi-Fi router?
I have physical access, but no password.
Okay. Well, usually what you see are cases where you have uninvited guests on your Wi-Fi. If you, I'll go ahead and record a short video about this, but basically if you go onto your wireless router and log in, you can pull an option to see which hosts are connected to your home Wi-Fi. And usually you'll see ones that you can easily recognize. Oh, here's my Kindle reader. Here's my Amazon Fire Stick. Here's my Google Home. Here's my, Alexa. Here are my iPhones. But then what are these? You'll see a whole bunch of other ones. And then when you search the MAC address, if you go to a MAC address lookup online, you can see what kind of manufacturer and device it is by entering the MAC address that's shown. And sometimes you'll get an unknown. If you get an unknown, you can run Nmap against that local network and identify the same MAC address, and it'll give you an IP address. You can basically track it down and then find out what it is and why it is. And that's something you can do for additional credit. Are there any questions before we clear today for our class, our final session?
I got a quick question.
Yes.
So for the 3.1 assignment
Yes.
that was due this Saturday, I was wondering, we're supposed to run GR seals up on our own PCs or on the remote PC?
Either or. That's a great question. You could do it on the remote PC. You could also do it on your local PC.
All right, I was just double checking.
Yes. Thank you for asking. That was some detail that I thought I had in there. You can do it on your local network or you can do it on the remote network. Any other questions?
So this is our last session. We're not meeting again on Wednesday.
This is the last session. If someone would like to meet on Wednesday, just to review stuff, I will be available on Wednesday at this time at 3 o'clock. And we can go over things in the study guide, right? In the addendum. In any of the topic summaries, like in chapter 12, if you look at the first 12 slides and you're like, I don't get this slide number 9. What does this mean? I'm available and I can also assist with assignments or solutions. It's a study day, so it's kind of wide open. And it doesn't necessarily have to mean that we're meeting at 3 o'clock. I'm available other times, but I'm going to remain in place and remain available through the entirety.
Quick
Yeah.
question. When is
Yes,
the final exam available?
the final exam is available. I thought we had that on the screen. It said it was available according to the exam schedule, it's available at 3 p.m. on Friday, 6 May. Not this Friday, but the following Friday. So 6 May, Friday, 3 p.m. is when it'll be first available. And then you don't have to take it at 3 p.m. You can start your 2-hour window to engage the exam at any time, as long as you're finished by 11:59 p.m. Saturday. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions before we clear for the day? Okay. All right, so as we finish completing our reconciliation and solution submissions and I post more scores, I am going to update in your My Grades where it's total possible, total earned. So as we progress through the end of this week and the end of next week, I'll be updating those. You can divide total earned by total possible. There is another total score you should completely ignore. If it doesn't say total possible and total earned in all caps, it's not the right number. Okay. All right. Well, I wish you good luck on your first attempt of the assessment for module 3. And then as you reconcile and retake that module assessment and get ready for your final exam, I wish you all good luck. Please don't hesitate to contact me if you want to resubmit any assignments or solutions for additional credit. The only thing you can't redo is the exam. Okay? All right, well, unless